Hello and welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Crow. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and this podcast is being recorded on the land of the Anishinaabe, Odawa, and Mississauga people. It's really important to me that I continue to learn about this land, the First Nations people who cared for it for so long, and the history and culture of my settler and immigrant ancestors who came here to Turtle Island. If you're new here and wondering who is this, I'm a Canadian yoga teacher, mom, entrepreneur, and forever student who loves to ask questions. That's why podcasting is a good fit for me. I get to ask questions about yoga each and every week and talk to some amazing people who run small businesses, yoga teachers, and just all kinds of fascinating people from around the world. And I'm so grateful that you are here learning along with me, sending your feedback, sending questions in. It's so great that we can hang out here and spend some time together. I also work as the founder of Pelvic Health Professionals, and this is another place where I get to ask a lot of questions, all specifically about pelvic health. This is where movement educators and pelvic health professionals collaborate and share and learn the most up-to-date information regarding pelvic health. And the really cool thing about this, if you're a yoga teacher and you're wanting to learn more about how the body works, and I say pelvic health and everyone assumes that means the pelvic floor, but it's way beyond that because we know that the pelvis is the center of the body. So there's a lot that's encompassed in this area of the body. And because I'm a yoga teacher, I really like to see how movement and breath and that down regulation of the nervous system, I've seen how many benefits that can have for our pelvic health. And that's why I'm really excited to tie the two things together. If you are wanting to check this out, visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com. Also, we have a really great 7-week yoga series coming up with Sarah Garden, all about pelvic pain, endometriosis, and yoga. So if you're wanting to check this out, make sure to visit pelvichealthprofessionals.com, and I'll also put a link to that in our show notes. Now, the inspiration for this podcast, the reason why it was even created is because I really get how it felt when I left yoga teacher training and I stepped out into the world of running a business and being a yoga teacher and trying to balance everything also going on in my life. You know, being a mom, being someone who's just like existing in the world and trying to pay my bills. It was a really tricky thing to navigate. And I've been a yoga teacher now for almost 20 years. And I've learned a lot along the way. And I wanted you to have this place where you can connect to other yoga teachers, ideas, and information. And hopefully it can save you some of the real bumps in the road along this journey. So if you are a returning listener, I'm so glad that you're back. Thank you for being here. Thank you for shouting out the podcast to friends. It really means a lot. Today's episode is powered by OfferingTree. So many of you know that I use and love this software in my own business because it automates everything. The bookings, the payments, Zoom links go out, reminders, and so much more. And we have a special podcast listener discount over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. So if you're thinking about signing up for OfferingTree, go check it out. They have a 14-day trial. And then if you're ready to sign up and use it yourself, use the code over at offeringtree.com/Shannon. So today's episode, I'm really excited that we're going to talk about a common problem that 1 in 10 people will experience in their lifetime, plantar fasciitis. So I don't know if you have felt what this feels like or if you've had friends explain what it feels like. We're going to talk about what the symptoms are like, but at some point in your career as a yoga teacher, you're likely to encounter someone who has experienced plantar fasciitis at some point in your yoga classes, or you might have it yourself at some point. So yoga can be a really helpful tool to manage plantar fasciitis. And I'm so excited because Diana Zodos Florio joins me in today's episode to talk about this. Diana is the founder of Threes Physiyoga, created to bridge the gap between physical therapy and yoga. She has a science bachelor's and master's in physical therapy and has been using yoga in her own life and to work with patients. Diana is driven by her purpose of helping people move and feel best in their bodies by empowering them with knowledge, tools, and science-informed strategies in movement, mindfulness, connection, and breathwork. She offers one-on-one sessions, has an online studio, and has been teaching yoga teachers how to integrate physical therapy science into their own practice and their teaching. In our conversation today, we talk about what is plantar fasciitis, the role of a yoga teacher when a student approaches you with plantar fasciitis. I also like that we get an inside view on how a physio deals with this. And we really look at how we can help those showing up in our yoga classes who are dealing with this very painful condition that we can sometimes have. We also talk about the benefits of barefoot walking, balance poses, calf stretching, and Diana shares some of her best tips and tricks for dealing with plantar fasciitis. I learned so much in this conversation, and I was actually thinking, oh my gosh, how have we not covered this up until this point on the podcast? So I'm just really excited that I get to share it with you. Let's dive right in and get into this conversation with Diana. Welcome to the Connected Yoga Teacher Podcast, Diana. It's so great to have you here today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Shannon.
Tell our listeners, what's the work that you do and who do you do it for?
So I am a physical therapist, licensed and trained in the US, and a yoga teacher, and a strength and conditioning specialist. My business partner, Emily, and I have founded a company called Threes Physiyoga Method. And that combines the principles of physical therapy with the mindful movement practices of yoga in order to sort of help people live their best in their body. So move well, move safely, support recovery from injury, but also attend to their nervous system. And we do that in a few ways. One way is we have an online studio, which is a combination of on-demand classes and progressive curated programs to help you support your own recovery. And then we also have an advanced yoga teacher training program, which is 250 hours, and it's very heavily influenced by biomechanics, kinesiology, and science of the nervous system. And we run that online. We'll start up again in September.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I started following you on Instagram, so I'll make sure that we link to your Instagram and all of your website and all of that in our show notes. I'm excited that today we get to talk about plantar fasciitis. Not that it's exciting if anyone's ever experienced it, but it's exciting because we've never talked about it on the podcast. And guaranteed, if you're a yoga teacher for any amount of time, someone is coming to see you or you feel it yourself at some point. So can you first tell us what is plantar fasciitis?
We could start with what is plantar fascia. So fascia is a form of connective tissue that we have throughout our entire body. And typically it interweaves between muscles and joints and tendons. And it's sort of what holds us all together. And plantar is the bottom surface of the foot. So the part of the foot that touches the ground. And it's this fascia that starts at the tippy toes and it sort of runs contiguously through the bottom of the foot and it joins into the Achilles tendon and interweaves into the muscular fibers of the gastrocsoleus, the muscles that make up the calf. So plantar fascia is what we're talking about is really interwoven from the whole back of the lower limb into the Achilles, into the bottom of the foot. And when we talk about plantar fasciitis, we're really talking about an inflammatory process that's occurring in one part of that bottom part of the foot fascia only. Fasciitis, that suffix means acute. So some inflammation you might have in that part of your body between 0 and 3 months. Fasciosis means more chronic. So that's something that you might have for 3 to 6 months. And so those are things to think about in terms of terminology. Now, that whole bottom of the foot fascia is affected by a lot. It's affected by what's happening in our calf and what's happening in our foot, but also above the chain. But of that, so we can go into that more. But if you Googled plantar fasciitis, you would find that it would state that it's an inflammation in the connective tissue or fascia on the bottom of the foot. I
And
could talk about,
what does
yeah.
it feel like then
Yeah.
for people who have experienced it?
So I think the sort of like the hallmark signs and symptoms that you'll hear someone say are um, it feels like I stepped on a piece of glass. There's burning in the sole of my foot. Um, it just it won't get better. And typically these people have a really tough time in the morning when they want to go from lying in their bed to standing up. And that first step down off their bed is like 10 out of 10 crazy pain. Why why is that? Because a lot of us actually sleep with our feet in plantar flexion, with our toes pointing down. So if we're sleeping on our back or our side or our belly, we're actually more plantar flex. You don't find a lot of people who sleep with their feet dorsiflex, the opposite. And in that plantar flexed position, the fascia is shortened. And so that first step in the morning is a big old dorsiflexion stretch as you put that foot down. It's like, and then that step and that feeling of stretch will pull on that part of the fascia that's inflamed and it'll send you through the roof.
So that's what people will be coming to us if they say, "Hey, like just so you know." And this is a great time, just a reminder, connected yoga teachers, that we don't diagnose anything as yoga teachers unless we're like some other professional, and we don't need to come up with a treatment plan, but gosh, it's so nice to know how we're going to change our yoga class, and also to know, like, okay, who is the person in my community who I might refer this person to, as well as doing yoga. So let's start there. Who would you, if you were not a physio, who would you refer people to if you were just looking at it as a yoga teacher?
A physio.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I do. Because they'll be the best person to get to the root cause of the problem. Physios tend to do a thorough assessment and give exercises that are prescribed to that specific person's uh, deficits. Um, I think you could get different types of treatments if you saw a podiatrist who might be more likely to prescribe orthotics, which could be something that would help symptomatically, almost like a band-aid, but it wouldn't sort of get to that root cause of why the fasciitis or fasciosis is occurring in the first place.
So then, as a physio, what are some of the things then that you are doing with someone when they come in with plantar fasciitis?
hmm and so this is some of the stuff we actually even teach in our training is we do an assessment of movement. And so a physio, well, before the assessment of movement, there would be a very thorough like history taking. And so we'd start with hearing that person's story. Um, when did it begin? What does it feel like? What makes it worse? What makes it better? What have you tried? What works? What doesn't? How has this affected your life? How does that make you feel? And are you sleeping well? Are you still able to enjoy things? We really like to bring in a biosocial spiritual aspect to our interviewing. And so even with something that's like plantar fasciitis, fasciosis, it can really affect someone's quality of life and can change their outlook. And all of that can affect their path of recovery. So that's sort of step number one, is understanding what those psychological, social, spiritual factors might be and thinking about how we could attend to them. And then the second part is really that movement assessment. So in Physiyoga training, we look at static standing and we evaluate the position of the foot and the ankle and the knee and the hip. And then we would examine how people's bodies change when they go into and out of movements like a squat or a lunge. And lunging is very similar to walking and running. As a physical therapist, we'd also put our hands on, and it would be really helpful to assess the movement of the portions of the foot and ankle. So we'd look at the movement of the ankle and assess all available motions at that joint. We look at motions of the hind foot, so the calcaneus and heel and talus, and then look at the midfoot, all of those beautiful metatarsals and cuneiforms. And then finally, look at the movement of the forefoot and the toes. You need to examine someone walking, even potentially how someone runs. So what plantar fasciitis is really a disordered, disrupted loading issue. So a lot of times we're trying to be investigators and try to see, if this person has plantar fasciitis on their right foot and it's right, in the lateral portion of the midfoot, how are they loading that portion of the foot when they walk and run? And can we help them change that? So it's not overloading that one point of the fascia. Or we're asking questions like, have you recently changed your footwear? Or have you recently started standing more? Or have you recently started walking or running more? Because those are also increased load to that one area.
Now, just to clarify,
Yes.
if yoga teachers haven't heard the term load, what does that mean when you simplify it?
Load means, when we're standing all day, we're putting force on to the tissues and the joints of our body. And that force, scientifically speaking, is our body weight times gravity. And in a beautiful setting, and who paints this picture really well is Tara Hargrove. He writes about efficiency of movement. So what we strive to educate our users who are in our online studio about, which is exciting, is how to move efficiently, which means all of the joints should be absorbing load. All of the muscles should be absorbing load of our body as we walk, run, jump, skip, almost as much as they can. Right? So when I walk, I should load through my foot, but then that load, that weight, that force that goes into my foot should be transferred up into my ankle, then into my knee and into my hip. When we have restriction in joints, some load can get stuck. So if I'm restricted in movement in my ankle, that force of my body weight could get stuck in my foot. So we're always looking at moving all of the pieces of our body so that load gets dispersed throughout the entire body. Like a baseball pitcher. They should not just be throwing the ball with their shoulder, because if they did, all the load of that action, all of the force would be on the shoulder. Instead, baseball pitching is a sum of all of the parts of motion. Stepping, twisting through the hips, rotating through the spine, extending through the spine. And all of those parts of the body that move spread the load of that force so that shoulder hopefully doesn't get injured. Does that make sense?
So helpful.
I get a little nerdy.
That's a really good example as well, like the baseball player. Connected Yoga Teachers, this week, a podcast listener reached out to me with their thoughts on a recent podcast episode. And I just want to say before I get into this story, I love to hear what thoughts and questions arise when you're listening to an episode. So I encourage you, email me. If you're not already on the email list, make sure to get on there or leave me a voice message. I love to hear your thoughts and questions. Anyway, this listener and I were chatting, and then along the way, after we chatted about the podcast episode, she actually had a question about software. She shared with me that she's currently using Kajabi and Calendly to host her website and also book people in. And she said that the cost of Kajabi is way too expensive. And then she asked me what I would suggest. So right away, I told her that she should definitely check out OfferingTree, and that's what I would suggest. She said that she knew that I talked about it a lot on the podcast as a booking software, but she didn't realize that it was also a website platform. So in case you are like her, if I have not talked about this enough, which obviously I haven't, this aspect of OfferingTree, it really is the best platform for websites that I know of for yoga teachers, apart from maybe WordPress. But I want to tell you that I've been using WordPress now for at least 10 years, probably more. Oh my gosh, it's been a long time. I built my own website years ago because Sean helped me to learn how to build websites on WordPress, but I don't suggest that for the average yoga teacher. So unless you love to figure out tech issues and code, just this week, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about hiring a WordPress expert to help me with a website issue that I'm having right now. And I want to say that with OfferingTree, this isn't an issue. There have been times where I've actually thought about switching my whole website over to OfferingTree. There are a few things that really hold me to WordPress, mostly with the podcast, and I don't do it. But if I was setting up just a basic, like, I need a website, I need to book people in, I need a membership, I need to host videos online, it'd be a no-brainer. It'd be OfferingTree all the way. Also, they've just created, this year, we're already into August, oh my gosh, they've just created some really amazing customizable website templates. So you can make your site look fantastic, like it's been designed by a website designer, because these templates have been. And you can also customize it to be your own. And it's so simple, and it's way cheaper than something like Kajabi. And the best news is that because you listen to the podcast, we have a discount code for you. Go over to offeringtree.com/Shannon to grab that. Alrighty, let's get back into today's episode with Diana and learn more about plantar fasciitis. Now, it's really amazing for the people that you work with and the people that you educate that you're both a yoga teacher and a physiotherapist. If you were not a yoga teacher, as a physio, would you be telling someone to go to yoga? And if you would, what would be some of the things that you would hope were included in that yoga class?
Oh, I think being barefoot is one of the best things you can do for any foot injury. So inherently, yoga is done barefoot, and that's beautiful. I would hope that the yoga teacher would be versed in sort of how to cue a tripod foot, how to keep feet in tripod throughout all of the standing postures and unstanding postures. I would hope that we would work on balance poses. So tree pose and half moon and warrior three, where we're feeling that connection of work in the foot, but also the ankle and the glute, because those things are important for load transfer. I would hope that there'd be lots of calf stretching. So lots of downward dog and forward folding. And just yoga. The thing about yoga that's different than PT is, in PT, that person would probably get a lot of calf stretching and sort of like exercises like toe scrunching and balancing on wobble boards. But in yoga, you really learn to connect the pieces. So the foot to the ankle, to the knee, to the hip, to all those beautiful balance poses. Um, Even poses like the warrior series can be really helpful just to feel the connection from the bottom of the foot to the hip. So I'd look for those types of things for my client in yoga.
What about when a yoga student comes in and they say, "Oh my gosh, like I can't do downward dog now. It's just so painful."
Mhm.
What do you suggest they do then?
Then I think just a seated forward fold would be or a seated posture where you sit in sort of like a dandasana, and you probably would elevate the hips and then just work on gentle dorsiflexion, plantar flexion. And you would start in plantar flexion would be very comfortable because that's the shortened position of that fascia. And then dorsiflexion, I'd say go to just where you feel the pain. Don't go into the pain. Any inflammatory process, we want to avoid making it more inflammatory. So just come to the pain and then back into plantar flexion. And you'd be surprised just by moving it over time. By the 10th repetition, they're moving a whole lot further back than they are at the first repetition. And you could work that into ankle circles. That would be an example of an active warm up for the plantar fascia and for the ankle and for the foot. We do a ton of ball rolling for the feet in Physiyoga for several reasons. But for this population, it is super duper helpful. It can help mobilize a stiff foot. It can help provide more mobility to the fascia, but also to all of those. There's 26 bones and 33 joints in the feet. So just by moving and massaging, you can add a lot more mobility to the feet, which is a big part of how we load the foot. And the other thing the ball rolling does is help to increase proprioception, which if you don't know, if you have plantar fasciitis or fasciosis for a long time, over time your balance and proprioception can decrease just because of disuse. So keeping proprioception, proprioception is our awareness of where our body is in space. And keeping that really healthy by ball rolling can be nice too.
If someone's listening to this and they're experiencing plantar fasciitis, can you tell them how they could try out ball rolling at home?
Yeah. So if you don't have a yoga tune-up ball, then a tennis ball can work nicely. Um, and you know those bouncy balls that they sell in the grocery store, like put the quarter in, turn the thing. My kids have. Those are nice. They're hard, but they're nice. And so I like to do this when I'm sort of brushing my teeth. It's a nice thing to do every day for foot health. And I would stand on the ball with the foot that's affected, and I'd put the ball sort of right under my foot, right where the heel ends and the midfoot begins on the lateral side. So the fifth toe side, the pinky toe side. And I just sort of put the ball there, stand on it, and gently shift my weight to my right side and then shift back off. Just play with applying more load, that keyword, on and off. And then I would roll. So then I would move my foot so that the ball would move from my heel to the base of my pinky toe. And I'd explore adding and taking away load as I did that. And then I'd roll my foot so that the ball would roll back down to my heel. And I'd move my foot just slightly to the right. So now I've got my ball lined up with the base of my fourth toe. And so then I'd put load on and off, and then slowly roll the ball up the fourth metatarsal till I get to my fourth toe, and then slowly roll back down. And so you'd repeat that for all of the toes. And then I like to go back. So after I've done all the toes and the big toe, then I'm like, okay, so what felt really bad? What gave me the most sensation? I'd go back there load and offload, load and offload. And then I'd finish off with some curling my toes in and then extending my toes all the way up, curling in, extending up, maybe do that 5 times. And then just a quick and dirty painting of the bottom of the foot with light pressure. So just like roll, 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 and then be done with that foot. So like 7 minutes into that foot. That's how I would do it. That's how we teach it.
I love it that this is also tied to like brushing your teeth habit so that it's something that you work in every day. That's a really great tip. Also, when you were saying like curling the toes in, sometimes I work with my own body in terms of like, okay, I'm going to try and pick up my sock or something. Or I love to do that in the yoga class as well, because people sometimes are walking with socks, taking them off. A couple of things that you said. The other thing that you talked about was the tripod foot. Can you talk to us about what that means if you were cueing that in, let's say, tree pose or even mountain pose?
Sure. So the tripod foot is the cue we use for how to stand. And I know a lot of people are like, well, what about the 4 corners? And so the reason why we don't cue 4 corners is we cue the points of the foot that connect, that are like the anchors to the 3 arches of the foot. There are 3 arches in our foot. I can't remember. It's like a medial longitudinal arch, a lateral longitudinal arch, and a transverse arch. And those arches are so important. Like an arch is the most stable, load bearing structure in architecture. And there's a reason why they're in our feet, because they help to disperse the load. Load is the word of the day, from our body across the whole foot, not just one part of the foot. So we need to stand in the tripod foot so that all of our arches are active and dispersing our body weight's load so we're not injuring ourselves. So what are those 3 points? Anytime I'm cueing tripod foot, mountain pose, come to stand equally on both feet. If that feels like you don't know what that feels like, let's take it back and roll our feet out and then try again. Now that we've rolled our feet out, come stand on both feet equally. And sometimes you have to close your eyes and really sense. And then once you're standing equally on both feet, make sure you have equal weight on the center of your heel, underneath your big toe knuckle, and underneath your baby toe knuckle. And that can be hard for people to know if they're doing it correctly. But it's more anatomically accurate than 4 points. And if you can do it right, it can be transformative for foot health, ankle health, knee health, hip health. And I would try to hold that tripod foot in tree pose. I would try to hold it in the back of a warrior 2. I would try to hold it in Dandasana. Imagine you're pushing your feet into an imaginary wall. Just sort of orients the whole lower limb.
Okay. I love that you're bringing this up because I remember learning in many different yoga teacher trainings, okay, it's the 4 points. No, it's the 3 points. So this is like a really great thing that we can all try, we can all play with. And I also encourage anyone who hasn't tried like doing a pose and then rolling out the feet and then doing it again, try that. It's just like a whole different understanding of your feet connecting to the earth. Also, I want to get into the discussion around bare feet versus shoes, because I've worked with yoga students who come in and tell me like, I have to wear these shoes. I can't go barefoot. It's too painful. So what about when someone's coming in saying that?
Well, I think if it's too painful, then we have to respect that. And it's almost like, why are they in pain when they're not in shoes? And it's probably because they're wearing really supportive cloud like shoes. And maybe they even have orthotics in there positioning their foot. And so you kind of have to strip away one layer at a time. So if I had a patient who came in with like hokas and some custom made orthotics, I'd say, okay, like the first step we're going to do is we're going to try 10 minutes a day without our orthotics in your hokas. And if you can do that, then we'll do half an hour a day. And then if we can do that, then we'll do an hour a day. Okay, great. Next, we'll try 10 minutes a day without our shoes on. And then if you can do that, then we'll do half an hour a day without our shoes on. Then we'll do an hour a day without our shoes on. So bodies love gradual. Bodies and minds love gradual.
I love
And
this.
wins.
True.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Are
then
there
just really, sorry, I just have to say, you have to celebrate when someone wins. So if you take those orthotics out and they feel great for 10 minutes, you have to make the biggest deal in the world about it. It
so
helps.
good. So
Mm-hmm.
good. Are there any frustrating myths or bits of misinformation out there that kind of keep you awake at night about plantar fasciitis?
Well, I sleep really well because
That's good.
I'm generally exhausted. But when I talk to my friends who, like I play tennis with a bunch of women and they're also runners. And they're my age, like mid 40s, and we all have kids. And God help us if we have to stop doing something. So if they get an injury like plantar fasciitis, they will get the injection, the cortisone injection, they will get the orthotics, and they will do an ice massage, and they will call it a day and get right back out on the court or running. And in my and then inside of me, there's always part of me like, but if we just like looked at the root cause of how mobile your 33 joints in your feet are and how strong your arches are and how you stand and how you run and how your hip strength is, then I bet you'd never get plantar fasciitis again. But that would mean we'd have to like spend the time to work on all of those pieces. Um, and I think just inherently people don't want to do that. They want to kind of get the band-aid quick fix and move on. And I think that's just human nature. But I tell you, I get my private clients are generally the people who are like, okay, everything's not working anymore. I'm ready, ready to like unravel my habits.
It's so true that we look for like the quick fix. And we don't want our day to day to be disrupted. Like you said, we want to just keep going. And that's the body's way of saying, hey, like something's a little off here. I'm just going to send you a little message or a shooting pain message. What about in the morning when people are feeling that pain?
Oh,
They're
great
going
idea.
to step.
Yeah, don't step. Before you get out of bed, sit up or lay down and just do those dorsiflexion flexion exercises. Do some ankle circles. Have a strap or a rope belt next to your bed. Do a quick calf stretch and then get up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Are there any other tips or tricks that you send home with people like, okay, try this or anything that really offers relief?
Calf stretching, stronger glutes, and mindfully walking heel to toe. A lot of plantar fasciosis people are foot slappers. So, like heel toe, heel toe, heel toe is important.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this
Mm-hmm.
is good. This is also bringing to mind like just even being mindful of like if you ask someone who doesn't do yoga, doesn't look at how their body moves and you said like let's look at how your foot is stepping down even for them to realize is a big gift when you have that awareness.
Yeah, it is. And people love to live on the inside or outside of their foot too. So that's why that center of the heel cue of the tripod is really helpful. And if they want, they can look at their shoes, like at the back of their shoes. I always do that. I always look at the back of people's shoes. And you'll see differences where like the outer edge of one foot shoe is worn way more than the other.
Yep. I definitely look at my shoes, and when I get new shoes and then you go back to the old ones, like sometimes
Yeah.
I wear them in the garden. I'm like, wow, really riding on the outside of these feet.
It's really important. I think especially as we age and we move less, it's really important to move well. It really is. And like tripod foot is probably one of the most easiest things that can make a big change, especially like knees, hips. So if I could get everyone in the world to just think about that a little bit, that would be awesome. Tripod foot and 360 breathing.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
If people have more questions for you or want to learn more from you, what's the best way that they can connect with you? Do you have one website that we could tell
Yeah.
them about?
Everything is on our threesphysioga.com website. Um, you'll find our yoga teacher training there. You'll find our blog there. We have a blog on plantar fasciitis, which I can give you the link to. We have 6-class program in our studio on foot pain and plantar fasciitis. And you'll find that in our website. And you'll find tons of Instagram posts too on feet and plantar fasciitis. Yeah, that's it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for all of this today.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you again, Diana, for all of this information. It was fascinating to find out both from the physio perspective and also from the yoga teacher perspective, and then to see how these really work so well together when dealing with something like plantar fasciitis. What's really fascinating also, a personal note here, is in the last 2 or 3 weeks, both my daughter and I were saying that we had like some pain in the bottom of our feet. Both of us were like doing a lot of walking or standing with work and with hiking and different things. And that's my guess of what it was. So right away, I was like, all right, let's get the little balls out and roll our feet out. And so far, so good. It's really made a difference. I'm so curious to hear from you, connected yoga teachers. What have you found helpful for plantar fasciitis? Share in our comments, or what questions do you have? What further questions do you have? Maybe it's about this, but maybe someone else is coming to your yoga class with a different condition that they're dealing with and we haven't covered it yet on the podcast. Let me know. To share a comment in the show notes, go to theconnectedyogateacher.com/337 and then just scroll down to the bottom and you can see where you can leave a comment there. Also, while you're on your computer, if you have not left us a review yet over in iTunes, please do that. Review us in any podcast app if you have that available to you. We'd love to hear what your favorite episodes are or how the podcast is helping you, and it really helps to get word out to other yoga teachers about the podcast. If you are wanting to hang out in real time, I have a couple of very exciting events that are happening. Both of them are online, so no matter where you are in the world, you can either attend live or get access to the replay of these. The first one is tomorrow, if you're listening when this podcast goes out. But don't worry, there is a replay. So we're learning all about sound and pelvic health with Shobana Mani. I'm so excited about this call. We're going to really dig into like how does sounding, sometimes we say chanting, but sometimes that freaks people out, as you know, as a yoga teacher. But how does that sounding really impact and benefit our pelvic health? If you're wanting to check out that call, head on over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com and you can see how you can join the membership. If you're already a member, you have access to that call. Also coming up in September, when all of the kids get back to school and we're ready to get back to class, we are doing a 7-week series hosted by Sarah Garden. I'll be there hanging out, doing some yoga, hanging out and making sure that all of the tech is working for this series. We're going to learn all about yoga for endometriosis and pelvic pain. So maybe you yourself are dealing with endo or pelvic pain, or you want to help your yoga students who are dealing with this issue. Sarah Garden is a yoga therapist who specializes in pelvic pain and endo, and she has endo herself and has used yoga to deal with this. And she's used yoga in her own life and she sees the benefits, and that's why she's sharing this out into the world. I'll make sure to link to a previous episode where we talk with Sarah Garden about endometriosis so you can learn more. And I'll also share the link of how you can sign up for this 7-week series. So again, you can attend live or you can have access to the replay. You'll have access to the replay for a full year if you sign up. That's happening September 21st to November the 2nd. It's happening at 3:30 p.m. if you're in Pacific time, 5:30 p.m. Central, or 6:30 p.m. Eastern. Head on over to pelvichealthprofessionals.com and look under yoga and you'll see this series with Sarah Garden. Next week, we're going to get into a topic that I'm really excited to talk about because it is something that I've seen showing up in my own community here. I'm going to hold off and tell you more about it next week, but we have covered it a little bit, but I'm excited that we get to dive in and cover it even more on the podcast. I want to thank our entire team over here, Suzanne, Crunch, Sinead. Oh my gosh, thank you for all of the work that you do in this world and for all of the work you do putting each and every podcast together. It's amazing. I notice right away if any one of our team members is away on holidays or, taking some well-deserved time off right away, I feel like, oh, I miss them. And they always figure out how to get their work done around holiday schedules. They're fantastic. If you want to check out our team, you can actually head on over to theconnectedyogateacher.com and under About, you'll see About our team, and you can even find out how you can work with these amazing people. I also want to say a huge thank you to you, dear listener, for listening all the way until the end of today's episode. And I hope that you take this and you use it in some way in your yoga class. I hope that it's inspired you for your own practice or your own yoga classes. Even if it's talking to people about foot health and how we can really care for that fascia along the foot. Just that alone, sharing that out into your community. Or maybe you want to share, in an Instagram video or in your next email. Take this information and share it in your own way out into the world. And as usual, I want to leave you with a question today. I want to ask, what will you be doing this week to stay connected to yourself, your yoga practice, and to your community so that you can share the yoga that lights you up?